Hey y'all, Matt Smith back here with you. Sunday morning, Week 8 SEC recap. Pretty light day in the league yesterday with just 5 games. I think they mostly went about as expected. So we'll go through some of the key takeaways. If there was a theme, it was probably that teams just kind of confirming who they are, what we thought they were over the course of the first 7 weeks. Again, I think the final scores kind of looked all like we thought they would for the most part. The games weren't necessarily great indicators of the final score, as we'll get through. But overall, not a ton of insight to really take away from yesterday. We'll go through the games each one by one, go through what I learned and kind of where all these teams stand heading into the final 5 weeks of the year. Let's start with LSU and Ole Miss. 31-17, Rebels get the win. LSU had an early 7-0 lead, had a fourth and goal at the 3. Ed Orgeron decided to go for it rather than take a 10-0 lead. It was intercepted in the end zone. Max Johnson threw a pick there. Ole Miss goes down and gets a field goal and rattles off 31 straight points to blow that game open. So really nice performance from the Rebels. The big plays weren't there for Matt Corral, partially because of scheme, partially because of not having his top 2 receivers in Braylon Sanders and Jonathan Mingo. He took what was given to him over the middle, made some really good throws into tight windows in the short to intermediate passing game. Running game was fantastic. Jerry Anali emerging after kind of being off the radar for the past few weeks. Complemented by Snoop Conner and Henry Parrish as usual. Ran for 266. Great day for the Ole Miss offense. And the defense, again, after holding Tennessee to 26, really did a nice job with this LSU offense. The running game looked like it had finally come to life last week when LSU beat Florida. Not yesterday. They could hardly do anything on the ground. Tough day for Max Johnson. They put Garrett Nussmeier in the second half. So a really nice, complete performance for Ole Miss on a day where in the past Ole Miss teams have struggled. All the pressure was on them. Tons of hoopla around Oxford. Eli Manning's jersey retirement. Arch Manning in town. Ed Orgeron back in town. But Ole Miss handled it really well. Took that shot early, but got the huge fourth down stop. And after that, the floodgates just opened for the Rebels. 31-17. They're 6-1. Now head down to Auburn next week, who was off yesterday for a huge SEC West showdown. Winner of that game will be set up nicely to be very much in the SEC West title race heading into November. Auburn does control its destiny because they'll get Alabama at the end of the season. Ole Miss, of course, already has the loss. But with an Ole Miss win, all you need is one stumble from Alabama, probably the rest of the way. And the Rebels could find themselves in Atlanta, could climb back into the college football playoff race. So a real great spot for the Rebels at 6-1 now as they head into that huge game next Saturday night down on the Plains. Tennessee, Alabama, 52-24, Alabama. If you went out to dinner, if you took a nap, you just saw the final score, you would have thought, okay, that's about what I thought. But the game really didn't play itself out like that. Tennessee had an early 14-7 lead, got a turnover, had a chance to expand the lead, but just couldn't quite take advantage of it. Alabama rallied, took a lead, held a 2-score lead for much of the second half. Tennessee would answer back with some big plays, but just on defense couldn't quite get that one stop to be able to get the ball back in the fourth quarter down by 1 score. So credit to Alabama. They ran 92 plays, had the ball for more than 40 minutes. That's how they won this game, was just wearing down the Tennessee defense, holding the ball that long. The yards per play were pretty close, 6.4 to 6.3 or something like that, only 0.1 or 0.2 away. So both offenses, from an efficiency perspective, operated pretty evenly. It's just Alabama had the ball for so much longer. Bryce Young was really good. I believe it's 31 to 43, a couple passing touchdowns, a couple rushing touchdowns. Ground game was good. John Mechie emerging again after that A&M game a couple weeks ago where he was really off. Has put together 2 nice performances in a row to kind of reclaim that number 1 receiver role alongside Jamison Williams there. So Nick Saban wasn't happy for much of the game, but overall you're kind of nitpicking if you're criticizing the Alabama offense. Defensively, the big plays got them again. It was a much different task than they had a week ago against Mississippi State, who was going to dink and dunk them, and they shut that down. But stretching the field has been a problem. We saw it against A&M, and we saw it last night. So when you're going to see teams like Arkansas in November and probably Georgia later in the season that can do that, that's a concern for this Alabama secondary that continues to underachieve. But the front seven really dominated that game. Will Anderson, fantastic again. So overall, pretty crisp performance from Alabama despite struggling to really pull away. But again, the secondary and the big plays, that's something to watch. Now with Alabama, of course, having no margin for error the rest of the way. And still some tricky games ahead of course, Arkansas, Auburn, and most likely Georgia coming up as they make their run toward getting back into the college football playoff for the 7th time in 8 years. Tennessee 4-4. They'll take an off week. Still in good shape for a bowl. They close with South Alabama and Vanderbilt. Probably going to take a loss to Georgia. So next week, the week after their idle week, go to Kentucky. If they can win that, you get to probably 7-5, and that's a really good season in year one. If you lose that, you're still 6-6, and I think that was the goal for year one under Josh Heupel. So overall, the ask of Tennessee this year was to be fun, exciting, threaten some teams who were better than them before ultimately losing, and I think they've done just that. So despite losing by 28, not even covering the line, despite having a lead in the second quarter, positive performance, I think, for the most part for the Vols. Hendon Hooker get healthy after the week off, go up to Lexington, and have a chance to pull off a really nice upset up there, I think. Mississippi State-Vanderbilt, 45-6. Nice bounce back for the Bulldogs after getting popped by Alabama last week. Defense really good. Will Rogers did his thing, 41 completions. They spread the wealth. 13 receivers or 13 players caught a pass. 11 had at least 2, and none had more than 5. So that is really spreading the wealth around for that Bulldogs offense. Still can't run the ball much, but the defense held Vanderbilt to 145 yards and a step back for the Commodores after nearly beating South Carolina last week. So 45-6, Bulldogs now 4-3. They'll face Kentucky next week in a pretty fun game in Starkville. A&M pounded South Carolina 44-14. At one point, it was late in the third quarter, South Carolina had 6 yards of offense. Not 6 points, 6 yards of offense, 0.2 yards per play. That looks more like a blood alcohol content figure than a yards per play stat, but that was the South Carolina offense last night. And you kind of knew once Vanderbilt got absolutely crushed by Mississippi State, knowing that the Gamecocks should have lost to the Commodores last week, you kind of saw this coming. Probably should have jumped on that A&M minus 20 or so line before the game. I did not do it. Oh, well. But A&M rolled, held on 44-14 after a couple late touchdowns for South Carolina to at least show some respectability. But again, for the first 3 quarters, there was absolutely nothing going on for that South Carolina offense. They are a gross football team right now. A&M got an early punt return from Anaya Smith. Zach Calzada, pretty good. Didn't have to do a whole lot. 2 touchdowns from Jalen Watermeyer is going to be a key player down the stretch here for the Aggies. In a league that doesn't have a whole lot of great tight ends, Watermeyer might be the best one. So after their off week, they'll have their 2 defining games. Auburn comes to College Station, and then they go to Ole Miss. So A&M sitting nicely heading into their off week. Another 100 day for Devin Achane and Isaiah Spiller, who are emerging as a very nice 1-2 punch out of the backfield over the past few weeks. So the Aggies, again, after that late September, early October swoon, still in a pretty good spot at 6-2, and a chance to make a run at the SEC West with wins over Auburn and Ole Miss, and just even one Alabama stumble as well. Let's see, Arkansas 45-3 over Pine Bluff. Not much there. KJ Jefferson only played the first half. I believe it was 45-0 at halftime. It's a bad Pine Bluff team, even by FCS standards. So a comfortable win for the Razorbacks, now up to 5-3, and the 3-game losing streak, and they'll head into their off week now, much needed after playing probably the toughest schedule in the country over the first 8 weeks. They'll regroup before Mississippi State comes up to Fayetteville in a couple weeks. And that about does it for the SEC. We'll touch on some of the other games nationally just a little bit here. It's ACC, kind of a crazy day. Pitt got the big win they needed over Clemson. Kenny Pickett was outstanding. Only 20 offensive points for the Panthers in that 27-17 win. Had a pick 6 off a shovel pass. That Clemson offense is, again, we knew it after the last couple weeks. You gave them a month to kind of work things out with DJ and trying to figure out the running back situation. Was Justin Ross back to pre-injury self? It's just not happening this year now, 7 games into it. They're 4-3. Pitt now 3-0 in the Coastal has a 2-game lead in that division, so they're in pretty good shape. They'll get most of their big games at home. Miami, North Carolina, Virginia, all got to come to Pittsburgh. Kenny Pickett very much climbing back into the Heisman picture as we start to look at that closer when the calendar turns to November. But a tough task for Pittsburgh yesterday as a favorite against Clemson, but they met that after falling behind early. Pickett was wonderful, threw a couple beautiful touchdown passes on long throws, and the Panthers now in great shape and the thing about the Coastal this year is it's not just playing for the right to get pounded by Clemson and Charlotte. The winner of that division will probably be even the favorite, depending on how the NC State-Wake Forest battle shakes out over the Atlantic, getting to the ACC title game. So not just that there's legitimate New Year's Six hope for whoever wins that Coastal division there. So again, Pitt the favorite, Virginia coming on. We'll touch on them in a second. But just a really solid performance by Pickett when the spotlight was all on him yesterday. He handled it beautifully. Panthers are 6-1. Miami, nice rally to sneak by NC State 31-30 with Tyler Van Dyke, the third-string quarterback, now the guy for the rest of the year due to injuries. A tough loss for the Wolfpack. A bit of a Dave Doran special. They're the better team. Miami's not bad, of course, but a game NC State probably should have won. First ACC loss, so they're okay from a conference title perspective. They'll play Wake in November in a game that likely will determine who goes to Charlotte out of the ACC Atlantic side there. But nice win for Miami. They still have some faint hopes for a division title, 2 losses in the conference. They'll go up to Pitt next week with a chance to upset them and get back in that race for sure. Wake Forest Army, crazy game. Wake only held the ball for 17 minutes but scored 70 points. They were just ripping off chunk play after chunk play against that Army defense. Of course, allowing 56 points is not good, but it's a triple option. When you know you're going to outscore them, you're not super worried about what your defense is doing. So Wake stays undefeated, 7-0. They'll play Duke next week, should get to 8-0 before some key games in November. That stupid non-conference game at North Carolina, because of the ACC schedule being so wacky, they scheduled a home-and-home in the non-conference. So it'll look like a conference game, but it's actually not. Then a couple fun division games with NC State, with Boston College the rest of the way. But Wake's good. I mean, 12-0 I think is very much on the table. They'll see Clemson as well, but that offense is rolling right now with Sam Hartman, Dave Clawson doing a great job, and the Deacons in great shape at 7-0. Virginia Tech, wow, another third straight home loss in 3 weeks. Let one get away against Syracuse yesterday. Had a 2-score lead late. Allowed 2 touchdowns to the Orange. Virginia Tech now 3-4. 4 of their last 5 on the road. It feels like it's over for Justin Fuente. Got a chance to right the ship a bit, but even at 7-5, if they would go 4-1, that's just a tough sell for what we expect out of this Virginia Tech program. So I feel like it probably ends after this year. Won't get into candidates too much. We'll wait till closer to that time. But a bad loss coming on the heels of a blowout home loss to Pitt last week, blowing a game against Notre Dame at home 2 weeks ago. Some Fire Fuente chants you could hear in the crowd at Lane Stadium yesterday. Not good right now in Blacksburg, as Syracuse gets a win to get back to get their 4th win after a 3-game losing streak, and Virginia Tech again now 3-4. Virginia, as I touched on earlier, won a shootout against Georgia Tech 48-40. They had those 2 early conference losses to North Carolina and Wake, but they're playing really good football now. Won 4 in a row. They'll go to BYU next week for Bronco Mendenhall's homecoming out in Provo. They get Notre Dame. And, of course, there are 2 big games coming up to close the season in conference play. At Pitt, in a game that could determine the Coastal Champion should Pitt take another loss along the way. And, of course, the rivalry game with Virginia Tech, a chance to potentially slam the door on the Justin Fuente era for their rivals from Blacksburg. I think that's it for the ACC. Big 12, Iowa State knocks off Oklahoma State. Fun game in Ames, 24-21 Cyclones. Cowboys take their first loss of this year. Kind of saw this coming. Cyclones were a 7-point favorite, unranked, but better than their polls suggested, given some quirky losses earlier in the year, and they'll be very much a factor in this Big 12 title race. Oklahoma, God Sooners, do it again. Spotted Kansas an early 10-0 lead, but steadily rallied back. Caleb Williams with some crazy magical plays. That 4th down that Kansas appeared to have Kennedy Brooks stop. Williams comes in and just rips the ball out of Brooks' hands, runs for a first down. They score a touchdown to go back up by 2 scores and deny Kansas an opportunity go down and win the game. So again, Oklahoma, those margins are thin. It's not going to last, but they survived Lawrence as 39-point favorites with a 15-point win there. They'll get Texas Tech next week before their off week. And then, of course, the huge close that will decide the Big 12 title race and any potential playoff hopes for the Sooners when they finish at Baylor versus Iowa State and at Oklahoma State. I think that about covers it there. 3-way tie potentially for the number 2 spot in the Big 12. Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Baylor. Not even getting the tiebreakers at this point. Slight edge to Oklahoma State and Iowa State there. But, of course, that required them all 3 beating Oklahoma, which isn't impossible given the way the Sooners are playing. But slight edge there as we start to look forward in that cluster of teams with the Cyclones, the Bears, and the Cowboys. The odd team out potentially could be Baylor, but again, that require them all beating Oklahoma. So probably won't come into fruition, but just wanted to mention that there. That should wrap up the Big 12. A couple nice wins on the road for Kansas State and West Virginia. Texas Tech, they needed that one yesterday over Kansas State, and they're now 5-3. They closed with the top 4 teams in the Big 12. So can they get bowl eligible? Matt Wells really needs to do that this year. That one stung. They had a 14-0 lead on the Wildcats. K-State rallied back for a 25-24 win. Tough loss for the Red Raiders yesterday at home. The Big Ten, the 9 overtime shootout. Illinois 20, Penn State 18 in 9 overtimes. Of course, the new rule this year, it becomes a 2-point conversion shootout starting with the third overtime. I don't like it. I think it's silly. I don't necessarily like the NFL model. I'd say maybe just go 1 overtime from the 35-yard line, normal rules. Maybe in the second overtime, go to the 25, maybe take out the PATs. But I don't think we need to do the 2-point conversion shootouts. That's silly. And it was pretty gross yesterday. Both offenses not very good. Only converted 3 of the 14 2-point conversion attempts. Illinois finally gets in the bottom of the 9th overtime. A walk-off by the road team in the bottom of the 9th. Okay, crazy. Not baseball, but still crazy nonetheless. And Penn State, with Sean Clifford banged up, he certainly was not himself yesterday. The running game hasn't been great all year. That offense is just gross. Defense is really good. Holding Illinois to 10 points, of course, that's a good effort. But to think the Nittany Lions can compete in Columbus next week against the Buckeyes without a healthy Clifford and no running game, that's going to be a really, really tough task despite having a pretty good defense, because Ohio State's going to score at least 20, 28, 30 points probably. Clifford's going to have to be healthy and play really special next week for the Nittany Lions to even compete in that game with the Buckeyes. As for the Buckeyes, rainy night in Bloomington, but again, rolling over Indiana 54-7. Ohio State just really hasn't played anybody since that Oregon loss, so as dominant as they've been, I hesitate to really move them up too high in terms of that Oregon head-to-head being a factor still. They've beaten Maryland, they've beaten Rutgers, they've beaten Indiana, who are now combined 1-11 in Big Ten play. So the wins are coming, and ultimately, I'll touch on that in my top 10 in a minute about my philosophy there. Ohio State's fine, but again, just beating up on some bad teams. They're crushing them. I think they're fine. I don't have many worries that they can roll through the tough part of their schedule coming up here with Penn State, with Purdue, with Michigan State. They'll be all right. But the schedule has just been so bad in terms of quality opponents since that Oregon loss a month or so back. Michigan solid win over Northwestern, 33-7. Defense fantastic. Still not sure about the passing game, but they run the ball really well, play good defense, classic Jim Harbaugh team, and can't wait for that big one next week up in East Lansing against the Spartans. Wisconsin may have found something now, 3 straight wins now. Going to Purdue with a convincing 30-13 win, brought Purdue down off the high of the win over Iowa last week, and now Iowa-Wisconsin next week will probably decide the Big Ten West when they meet in Madison. Pac-12, Arizona, 19-game losing streak now. Had Washington Friday night, let it get away. 21-16, Huskies win it. October 5th, 2019, the last win for the Wildcats, now 19 straight losses. They see Cal, so they got a couple shots for wins coming up. Who knows, they could beat USC next week with as screwy as the Trojans are. But just crazy now, we're going almost 25 months since Arizona has last won a football game. Oregon survives. They're kind of like the Oklahoma of the Pac-12. They're doing just enough to get by these past few weeks. 14-0 deficit early, rallied back, scored 34 the next 37, and then held on late for a 34-31 win over UCLA. Ducks, they're holding strong, but without C.J. Verdell in the backfield, Travis Dye did have 4 touchdowns yesterday, but 35 yards total. So that offense is kind of inconsistent. Anthony Brown as a passer is still not a big believer in that. So I think there's another loss coming. So that Oregon-Ohio State dilemma that the committee might have, I think it plays itself out. But for right now, the Ducks are still winning and getting by. Only that one loss to Stanford a few weeks back. And Oregon State knocked off Utah. Utah was the last remaining unbeaten team in conference play in the Pac-12. Beavers 42, Utes 34 last night in Corvallis. And I think we're setting ourselves up for the Civil War at the end of the season. Oregon State at Oregon will probably decide that division. Beavers a pretty good team, 5-2. Now, non-conference, USC falls at Notre Dame, 31-16. Did their usual. Clock management was a mess at the end of the first half. A couple stupid penalties. They were bad in the red zone with a big turnover, an interception that was run back deep into USC territory. So they actually outgained the Irish, who were pretty good on offense. Went with more of an up-tempo offense with Jack Cohn. Kyron Williams, just one heck of a running back. Got a lot of dirty yards after contact last night in that Irish win. So Notre Dame had a big lead, let it get close, but then had a touchdown drive to kind of ice it. And the same old stuff from USC. Drake London's the best receiver in the country. Just incredible after the catch, getting those extra yards, but not a lot of help around him. So USC falls to 3-4. as the Irish make it 4 straight in that rivalry. And I think that about wraps it up. Washington State, after their crazy week, good effort against BYU, but missed an extra point and then couldn't convert the chaser on the 2-point play after that. So BYU holds on 21-19. They've beaten 4 Pac-12 teams now and will face USC in the season finale later in the year. So good job by BYU righting the ship there after a couple losses the past couple of weeks. And I think we'll call it there. Not much in the group of 5. Cincinnati struggled a bit with Navy, but got a win. SMU, San Diego State, UTSA all stayed perfect. They're kind of your next men up should something happen to Cincinnati. SMU, of course, has it in their hands. They'll go to Cincinnati in late November, and we'll probably see them again for the conference title. So 2 swings at the apple against the Bearcats for the Mustangs to get a big win coming up in November and December. Top 10 at the moment. I have Notre Dame back in the top 10, taking over that 10 spot with some of the losses yesterday from Oklahoma State and from Penn State. Ole Miss at number 9 on the strength of their big win over LSU. Got the Buckeyes at number 8, Oregon 7. Again, I'm fine with flipping Ohio State ahead of Oregon. I'm not super into that head-to-head matters over everything. I look at your resume in totality. But again, I just want to see Ohio State, as dominant as they've been, do it against a really good team. And despite what Penn State did yesterday, I would consider Penn State to be a good team still. And should Ohio State handle Penn State with ease next week, I think I could see myself bumping the Buckeyes up next week. We'll see how the committee handles it. They got another week before they have to give us a word salad about how they come up with their rankings starting on that first Tuesday in November. So Buckeyes 8, Ducks 7, Oklahoma down to number 6 after another poor performance. And Michigan State, they were off yesterday. They're up to number 5. Michigan at 4. I have Alabama at number 3. Cincinnati 2, and Georgia 1, who was also off yesterday. They'll get Florida in the cocktail party next week. Guess we'll wrap up with a look at next week. Kind of a crazy from a viewing menu perspective. Yesterday, all the big games were in that 3:30 Eastern window. Next week, all the games are outside of that 3:30 Eastern window. Noon window's pretty strong with Michigan State being your Fox noon game. You got Texas, Baylor, and Iowa, Wisconsin. There's some fun early games. And then the late afternoon window, you got Georgia, Florida. Maybe Florida has something. We'll see. Texas Tech at Oklahoma. It might just be a close game because it's Oklahoma, but not overly impressed with Texas Tech. Colorado and Oregon. Again, I think most teams can give Oregon a game the way the Ducks are playing right now, but Colorado's pretty bad. They got crushed by Cal yesterday. So don't see a whole lot there. So again, that late afternoon window looks pretty dry. We'll see what happens. Primetime is fantastic. You got Ole Miss and Auburn, might be the best game of the week there. That's your ESPN primetime game. Penn State, Ohio State, I expect a much better performance from the Nittany Lions next week. But as that Big Ten round robin gets going, we'll potentially knock some teams a step or two behind with Michigan State, and Penn State, Ohio State next week. Big game in the American, SMU at Houston, both teams undefeated in conference play. They'll do battle down in Houston. We got North Carolina and Notre Dame, not the game we probably thought it would be going into the season now with the Tar Heels having 3 losses, but still Sam Howell against that Irish defense could be a pretty entertaining matchup there. And a couple good things late night, touched on Bronco Mendenhall going back home to BYU with Virginia. A good game there between a couple of 2-loss teams. UCLA, Utah, big game in the Pac-12 South. Then a really fun Mountain West game is Fresno State. And their fun offense with Jake Haener and Jalen Cropper. They'll go to San Diego and try and pull an upset over the unbeaten Aztecs, who survived Air Force last night in Colorado Springs. So that's a kind of a look ahead to Week 9. Best bets were decent yesterday, 3-2 back on track. Got you about a 59% clip for the year. So holding steady there on the best bets front. I think we'll call it there. So I'll be back on Wednesday to preview Week 9. Again, thanks so much for watching. Please rate and subscribe. Reach out to me on Twitter anytime, of course, at MattSmithCFB. I'll have my written recap up later today on SouthernPigskin.com. And thanks so much for watching, y'all. See ya.